Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. This episode is a previous recording of our live Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer series, where a live audience asks questions of professional Scrum trainers. We hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located today. Welcome to Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer. I am Lindsay Valesina, and I will be the moderator today. And today I have Arun here. He is one of our professional Scrum trainers here at Scrum.org, and we're super happy to have you. So let's move ahead here. And very quickly on who is Scrum.org, we are the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber back in 2009, and our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. We do that through our professional Scrum training, certification, and ongoing learning. We have a lot of free learning opportunities here at Scrum.org, so please check that out on our website and in our resources. We also have learning paths on our website that you can check out. So we hope that this session today too plays a part in that ongoing learning journey. So I will hand it over to Arun to introduce himself, to get to know him a little bit before we start asking questions.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay, for a very good introduction. So hello, everyone. Myself, Arunvignesh. I shuttle between two countries, Malaysia and India. Predominantly, I live in India, down south in India, Coimbatore. I'm a PhD, as Lindsay said, and I'm also an ICF coach. So I also teach people on different agile coaching programs as well, and I'm also an ORSC trained coach. So my research interests is more on team coaching, the relationship-based stuff, and then handling agile transformations. That's a brief about me. So over to you, Lindsay.
Okay. All right. So please, if you have just joined, we had a few people trickle in. So just a reminder, please enter any questions that you have for Arun. He is our expert here today to answer your Scrum questions. So please ask him anything you want about Scrum, and you can add those into the Q&A box at the top of your screen. That is where we will be capturing all of the questions. So you can start entering your questions there, and I will get through as many as I can in this session. So this question from James: my team wants to embrace a Kanban workflow while still using Scrum. What are your thoughts on this, and have you supported teams to use this in the past?
Absolutely, James. So you're on the right track, I would say. If you've implemented Scrum and you want to see your teams deliver the value or the flow of value in a much better manner, then using Kanban would definitely help. And one of the core agile principles that we embrace in Scrum is keeping it simple and then working on the most important stuff. By using Kanban, you have the concept of work in progress, limiting the work in progress. That way you limit the number of items that you work, even while you're using Scrum, so that you're focusing on the most important stuff that is really valuable to the customer. So definitely you can very well use it. And as I said, in my experience, we have used it in many teams. The two concepts, at least if you take from Kanban, limiting the WIP and managing the workflow, if you're using these two better, then your Scrum is going to go to the next level of delivering value to the customers. I hope that helps.
Awesome, thank you. And then there's a follow-on question here. Do you have any tips on limiting work in progress?
Okay, so when you say tips, it really depends on your teams to say how much they can work inside at a given point in time, right? So the tips typically I would say is start with a very smaller bit and then try and see how you're able to finish that particular item and then move on to the next item. that would be the tip. I would give it to any team that is embracing Kanban when they are implementing Scrum as well.
Great,
I
thank
hope
you.
it works. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so what methods can you use to keep retrospectives fresh? I've tried a few variations and they all feel like the same format of what went well, what didn't go well, etc.
Okay, so here is where I'm going to introduce a tool called, I'm not sure if you know already, there is a tool called Random Retros, randomretros.com. You go and ask for a new retrospective technique, it will throw you n number of options. So try to get the options that the random retros throws to you. That's one way to do it. And another way to add in, as if you're a Scrum Master, to add it onto your repertoire is liberating structures. There are 33 different types of liberating structures. If at all, if you could use one liberating structure in one retro, you'll not be feel bored, definitely. And also there is a concept of strings where you can combine two liberating structures techniques and then start using it in your retrospectives. So if you're not aware of liberating structures, again, it's in liberatingstructures.org. That's the website name. It's a free website where you can go and explore these options. And they have a community as well, a Slack group where to collaborate with different people using liberating structures and then gain knowledge from the community as well. So yeah, try it out.
Awesome, thank you. Those are great ideas there. And I'd like to add, there is a website, tastycupcakes.org. A bunch of PSTs contribute different retrospective ideas and other ideas in there for facilitating events. So feel free to check that out as well. So this question here, so we might need to ask for some more context for this one, but I do want to ask it. So in automation, can I use Scrum or does it have to be waterfall? My team uses UiPath and I can't demo much sprint by sprint. Please guide. So do we need more context or are you good?
Yeah, I would need a bit more context, but honestly, I'm not used to UiPath as such. But just to talk about your first question, in automation, can I use Scrum? So it is like Scrum embeds automation very well. I have seen recently teams started using this AI ops. So I don't know how many of you might have heard of DevOps, DevSecOps. But if the new trend is AI ops, if you've heard of GitHub, GitHub has a new feature coming up called Copilot. The Copilot helps you, if you're a developer writing your code, it helps you automate the unit test cases. It reduces the time, and also the developers are at times hard on not writing the steps or the documentation for the code that they create. Now this Copilot has a feature to automate that, the explanation of what your code is as well. So that way you have some sort of a productivity done. So if I'm not wrong, if you're talking about automation with respect to testing, yes, you have a lot of opportunities now coming into picture with the advent of with the usage of test-driven development, where you have opportunity to start doing testing, make the test cases fail, and then developers start correcting those or fixing things for the failed test cases. And that way you have an automated test already inbuilt as part of your coding thing. So those are the stuff that is there. While using Scrum, you can embrace automation as well. Yeah, so over to you, Lindsay.
That's great, thank you. Okay, so this person asked, what are the options for introducing high priority work in the middle of a sprint?
Okay, first of all, I would like to not challenge you, but have you think, if your sprint is of shortest duration, think it like, first thinking that I would recommend is to see how we can hold this particular item until the end of the sprint and start taking it to the next sprint. That way, you don't have to introduce items in the middle of a sprint, so that the teams have a very good focus. Maybe second option, very, very high priority. Yes, I need to bring that in. Probably the discussion with the developers as a product owner, if assuming that if a product owner needs to introduce that, having a conversation with developers to see how the new thing is going to add value to the sprint goal, and then trying to have a trade-off on the items that they've already picked up, try and see if they can pull out some of the lower priority items and then kick this in. Still, the sprint goal is there, or still the sprint goal is not being endangered. That's the core thing that you need to focus on. So again, it's collaboration with the developers. That's the answer, but depends on the context. Why it is very, very important, trying to give that context better to the developers and make them understand, and then collaborating with them to trade off any low priority items. That would be my second approach.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Yeah, and if once we have these questions answered, just for our live audience here, if you need any clarification or follow-up questions, feel free to add those back into the Q&A and we will circle back. So this question here, it's a very broad question, but I can help narrow it down a little. So how long should each sprint last? So do you want to maybe share tips as to like how to determine the best sprint length for your team?
Okay, so typically I take this analogy. I don't know how you think. Think of you're driving your car on a highway on a sunny afternoon. The visibility of the road be pretty clear, and you can speed up for a longer distance, right? Relate this to your product backlog. If your product backlog is clear and you don't see any hiccups in middle, most of the stuff at the top of the product backlog items, then you can extend your sprint length, but it should not exceed 1 month, right? Now, opposite of this, you're driving the same highway on a midnight, which is heavily raining, a bit foggy as well. You wouldn't speed up, right? You try to look out how as much as possible or as frequently as possible to see what is coming in front of you. So that's how, if your product backlog is very volatile, very uncertain, you have a lot of uncertainties, a lot of complexities, then try to reduce your sprint length. But keep remembering your sprint should always produce an increment that you can use to validate your assumptions. So consideration of complexity of the requirements, then your time that your team needs to create an increment to generate value. So these are the two major considerations I would recommend you guys to determine your sprint length. Yeah. So those should be my tips for the sprint length.
That's great. I hope that helps. Okay, so somebody asked, can I ask you what are the pros and cons for using lead time and cycle time metrics compared to burn down charts? And maybe share some of your favorite metrics in general.
Is the question around cons on using lead time and cycle time than the burn down?
Pros and cons.
Okay, pros. Both. I would say there are only pros. Mostly, I would think that angle, because these lead time and cycle time are my favorite metrics, as you asked. See, lead time and cycle time are pretty contextual, I would say. So if I could explain for the audience perspective, lead time is more like the end-to-end time that you take from a customer request to delivery. A customer has requested it and you delivered it, right? This is your lead time. Cycle time has multiple forms. You can add context to it. Like in the lead time that I said, customer has requested it. Now the product owner received the request and then brainstorm with the stakeholders, whatnot, the time that the product owner takes, and say, yes, I'm going to do this. Now there is a cycle time from customer request to product owner finalize this. Yes, this is going to the product backlog, right? This is, you can call whatever product owner finalizes in cycle time or something like that. Then then the developer picks in, and then the time, when I say developers, it's the developer group, right? The entire group picks in, and then they take time to complete it. So that time is your development cycle time. So this is the explanation that I gave. Right now, the pros of this two matrices is that you have an opportunity to know, hey, when there is a new request that is coming in, which is not there in the market at the moment, how long do I take to get it to done? That is given by your lead time, right? Now, within that lead time, let's assume for an example, I talked about product owner finalizing, and they take a time. They take about 15 days to finalize a requirement. And whereas when the development time takes a similar amount of time. Now 15 plus 15 is 30 days is my entire lead time, and one part is your product owner approving cycle time, and then the development cycle time. Now you have an opportunity to take an action to say, how can I reduce these cycle times in a way that I have my entire lead time reduced, so that I can turn on a dime when there is a new opportunity that is coming in. I'm going to the market first, and I can grab some market share, so that it gives me value as a product owner. At the same time, I'm the first to solve that problem to the customer. The customer is also satisfied. So that's how these two matrices are very, very important. These are the pros. Honestly, I don't see any cons as such with lead time and cycle time, but I would love to hear any. If you have to compare with the burn down charts are more an indicator to you guys if you use the burn down chart for the right purpose. As in, I've seen certain organizations use the burn down chart as a productivity metric to say how their things are finishing up or something like that. I wouldn't recommend doing that. So what I would recommend is using burn down charts for. Someone at the start asked about limiting the work in progress, using that as a concept in Scrum. So typically, wherever teams have worked, the burn down chart goes like a flat, and then it comes down on the last day. That is a sign that you have a higher number of work in progress items. If you're introducing work in progress limit as 1, let's take for an example, at any given point in time, the team can work on only one item, which means all the team members need to focus on that item, complete that first, which means you're bringing the burn down to a level, or bringing that down on an earlier day, which means that's how you should be using the burn down chart, using burn down charts for taking continuous improvements in a way you start finishing items rather than stop starting, start finishing, right? So that's how you have to use the burn down charts. So it has all these matrices has the pros in it if you use the right way.
Great, thank you.
I covered it in a way that is.
Yes, and I think you covered a couple other questions that came in too, so that was perfect. Okay, so this question from Tao. How do you prioritize technical debt and add technical improvement tickets and sprints?
Okay, so I don't know if you're a product owner or a technical person. Trying to find a business case value for your technical items would help if the product owner is not prioritizing it. That's one way to think. The other way to think is like trying to give it a good thing. If you're a product owner, right? If you're looking at your product to go for a longer run, then definitely you got to bring those items, at least 1 or 2 items, mix and match with the business items that you have, so that you have a mix of features as well as technical items that is available. That's a tip or a recommendation that I would give. What's the question? Did I miss the question? So how do you prioritize? Is that how the question?
Yeah, how do you prioritize technical debt?
Yeah, so one is giving it a business case to understand what value it is going to deliver at the end of the day. That's one way to think in the terms of value. So giving a technical test also a value. And then another tip could be bringing the technical debt as part of your sprint, or mandating a thought process in your team, like, hey, we need to have at least 1 or 2 items as part of a sprint backlog, so that we are constantly improving our product's quality, right? So that we can stay in the market for longer runs. And also taking some reports out in the market. How often have products been failed because of their poor quality? So I've worked in many organizations. I can vouch for this. Could be there in all your organizations as well. You have something like known bugs in your system. If you ask the count of known bugs, people cannot give the exact count, because that many known bugs we will have in our system. That is also a type of a conscious choice that we take in our systems to go faster to the market. That is going to come back as a bomb over a period of time. So have these stories into your teams in a retrospective if possible, and then trying to educate them in a way that why addressing technical debts is very, very important if our product has to go for a long time.
That's great. Thank you. All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. So this question from Ina, thanks for the opportunity to ask questions. What are the biggest challenges introducing Scrum to a new team that never worked with it? What would you recommend for a beginning Scrum Master? So 2 questions.
Yeah, so I'll go with the first one, and then I'll go to the next one probably. Great. So you talk about biggest challenges. The biggest challenge is it's like this, right? You're going to challenge their status quo. That's the biggest challenge. So leave about Scrum. Leave about introducing Scrum. If you're going to introduce any new change to a person, it is going to be difficult for them to accustom to it, right? So it is like you are working in a normal way. So I don't know if I can take this example. So let's take for an example, if a virus enters into our body, right? What would our body immune system do? It is going to resist because that is an unknown thing, right? Similarly, if you're going to introduce any change, let's say for example, Scrum, if you're going to introduce, if they don't have enough information about what is changing and why it is changing, then that is going to bring resistance. They're not going to resist. They're going to resist because they don't know what it is. Giving as much information about what Scrum is all about and how is it going to help. How is it going to help them in a positive way, not in a negative way, addressing all those concerns about their, or probably I would put it like empathizing the audience, empathizing the team members in what all ways they might get their negative thought into their minds, addressing those negative things with a positive storytelling or positive way of giving information minimizes most of the challenges that you're going to that are going to come when we introduce Scrum. Right? This is outside of Scrum. Scrum doesn't talk anything about introducing change. This is typically change management tactics. If you have known how to introduce a change, then use the same tactic, right? That's the one. So minimize the resistance of the change or a new change as less as possible. Obviously, there'll be people resisting as the change, or there will be people who are embracing the change as well. Use them as change agents to help the other people come on top as well. So that's how that's the tip that I would give you to minimize the challenges as introducing Scrum to the new team. That's one. Next recommendation for a beginning Scrum Master. If you're a new Scrum Master that you're starting in a new team, again, start coming to the communities and then try to see how you can take some learnings that are already there in the industry. There are free community events like these. Ask for a lot of tips. There are a lot of questions that have been put up in this as well. Those are some of the references that you get to know. There are different points that are coming into you into the system, right? So we have typical every human being goes through this cycle of learning. So they start with unconscious incompetence, which means you don't know what you don't know, right? Like a kid trying to walk, or a person trying to learn driving a car. You don't know what you don't know at the start. Now, when someone teaches you, let's say, go into a proper education program like PSM probably, or a PSPO, and then coming to those and then learn what it is, where you're going to get conscious competence. You're going to learn something, right? Conscious competence. That's a second layer. As a Scrum Master, consciously learn some concepts. Now, consciously practice it. Next level is gonna, you'll have a lot of struggle, right? That's where it's gonna say conscious incompetence. You know what you don't know now. Now you're gonna consciously practice. Practice is the only thing that is gonna take you to the next level. So come to the community and practice. If you're at your home, if you could apply Scrum as a concept and then try to do your daily tasks, that could be another example. Your organizations, go tell your team that, hey, I'm very new. I'm going to try this. Help me out. Be open, be vulnerable. People are definitely good humans, right? So we have good humans in our teams. So they will definitely help you as well. So those are the baby steps I would try and say as a new Scrum Master to take in to get some experience and then take learnings.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So this question I want to ask, because other people may run into this too at some point. So our PO is about to move on as he has a 6-week notice period. I want to ensure that the team keeps its togetherness and we continue moving forward. How have you ensured smooth transitions in the past? A PO feels like a key member to leave. However, we have good documentation and have discussed any knowledge silos he may have.
So I'm going to talk up with the first question. There is a two-part question, I understand. So first question was like, if the PO is leaving in 6 weeks' time, how do I make this transition smooth? The first thing would be, if at all there is a new PO identified or hired, that's great. There is a transition, what you talk about. But in case this is a sudden thing that's happening, you can't hire someone from 6 weeks. In your teams, do you have one who is volunteering to step up into PO's role? That would be the first thing. If no one is volunteering, probably check out in your next circle in your organization if there is any volunteers. Volunteering works better because they're going to bring up that passion towards learning and then trying to step up. So that's the tip that I would give. In case nothing works, then probably you need to see who's the most possible fit and then trying to see if they have an alignment on these PO role, and then trying to educate them what's in it for them when they get into a PO role, and then trying to get on board on their thought process. Again, this is a change that we're talking about in the previous case as well. You need to tell them what's in it for them as well. That's when it's gonna work well for them. So these are the 3 things that I've tried in my experience to get on board for a new PO for a PO leaving. I hope that helps. I hope I
That's good advice. That's good advice. Thank you. Okay, so another Scrum with Kanban question that was asked. Since there aren't any sprint goals, how can we get team members to own their delivery in Kanban?
So if you're using Scrum with Kanban, then there should be a definitive goal, sprint goal. That's another rule, along with the rule in the sprint, like every sprint should have an increment, every sprint should have a sprint goal. But in case you're only using Kanban, yes, that's the downside of Kanban, I should say, because it's first in, first out. You don't have, in my view, again, views differs from different people as well based on their experience. In my view, if you are only using Kanban, that's the downside because you cannot galvanize your team into a single group or a team. When you call a team, they are ones that are going to work together towards a collective objective. So that's the missing piece in Kanban. So probably use Scrum and then on top of it, Kanban, both works well.
Okay,
OT, yeah.
great, thank you. Okay, so next question. What are some things that you've learned that helped you feel confident as a Scrum Master? I'm relatively new to the role.
Okay. I can tell, okay, I have to think about my experience, right? So in my experience, what made me confident is my failures. I know when I do some things, I will fail. Taking learnings from those failures definitely made me confident, or I should say, all my failures made me a stronger person as well. Also, in my initial days, I was actually frustrated with the things that I'm thinking not working. Don't take it personally. Embrace this is a job that this is a thankless job, right? Don't ask for look for any gratifications at the initial phase. Try or prepare yourself for a lot of experimentations and a lot of failures. But the key thing is start learning from every failures. That's the one that is going to make you stronger. If I could quote an example, in my initial days, my teams don't deliver value. My burn down charts doesn't come down as fast as possible. I used to follow up just like anything, going in round here and there, trying to solve all the obstacles possible. At the end of the day, I would have burnt out. Then I thought there is a power called delegation, giving people a bit of accountabilities for their job, and then I'll asking them, hey, how can you get this done? This is your ownership. What is that you can do? Asking some right questions from them. It'll help you less burnout, and at the same time, people will feel empowered. Hey, this is something I'm owning, right? That gives them what's in it for the that wow factor or that excitement factor. I'm owning this. I'm going to take care of this. Those sort of stuff. So yeah, prepare for failures. That's going to make you confident.
Great, thank you. That's really good advice there for new Scrum Masters. So this question from Rashna. We are a remote Scrum team that works around the world, and that makes us difficult to run a sprint when most developers start the day. Some of us are closing the day. We have multiple clients in one team. It says sprint team. I don't know if you meant Scrum team. In one sprint team, which is where it is difficult to have a single sprint goal. What do you suggest for a team like that?
I see this as two questions, Lindsay. So the first question is, you're working in a remote setup. And also the question was, if I heard it right, some of the developers are closing when some of the developers are coming in. I could relate this experience when I was working with a client service model, where you have this typical challenge of non-overlapping hours. This is where we thought of doing this, sharing the pain and pleasure, right? So we had a retrospective and then sought inputs from the team, and the team had come up with an initiative called, hey, you know what? 2 sprints, which probably a month, we were running 2-week sprints, right? So 2 weeks, we will come late to office. One part of the geography, come late, so that we have some overlapping hours. Next 2 sprint cycle, the other part of the team will come early. So which ways this brought that overlapping hours a bit more higher. That way we were able to collaborate. That's one recommendation that you can see if it works for you. Probably second question, what was that question, Lindsay, if you could read it again?
So I think that was the main question. They did mention we have multiple clients in one sprint team. I don't know if they meant Scrum team, which is where it is difficult to have one single sprint goal.
Okay.
What do you
So I
suggest?
get where you're coming from. So when you have multiple, when you say multiple clients, I'm not sure if they are, so consider those people are stakeholders. Can I consider
Yeah.
them as stakeholders? I could consider them as stakeholders. Then my question would be, do you have a product owner who can take decisions on behalf of the stakeholders or for the product, on behalf of the product? If your answer is no, then probably the first option would be to identifying a person who can take decision on behalf of or on behalf of your product by collaborating with all your stakeholders. That way, the product owner can keep that decision making transparent with a single product backlog, with all these decisions stacked up in the product backlog, in which order it is going to come. That way, you're going to manage your stakeholder expectations in a way that, you know what, your items are coming in this sprint, your items are coming in this sprint. That way, you have an opportunity to create a coherent sprint goal that your sprint team can work on.
That's great. Thank you. I hope that helps. Okay, so this question from Nadeem, I had asked for some clarification here on the question to simplify it a little bit. I don't know if you saw it come in earlier, but so our sprint timeline is 10 days and 10 new features will be covered in this sprint. Unfortunately, the team only completed 8 features before regression testing. Then how can we make a release in which we want all 10 features? Either we extend the sprint or what?
Okay, so this is what the typical this is the learning that we should take, Nadeem. So you said this is not working, right? Then probably we should change something. It's not like we can make it work, something doesn't work, right? So typically in waterfall, you have this passing of lateness to the next sort of cycle. That's what we are reducing here. We're going to start finishing items. How can we do that? We have to reduce the number of items that we are picking up. How can we do that? The way that we can do that is by creating a sprint goal. So now the whole focus is not 10 features. The whole focus is the sprint goal. Coherent. Let's take for an example, the 10 features that you're taking up is, let's take a layman example. Like everyone knows Amazon. Amazon has multiple features. Like let's take login as a feature, homepage as a feature, payment as a feature, likewise. Now, think in a perspective of, hey, what would be my sprint goal if I'm starting Amazon like product? If I'm Jeff Bezos, I would be wondering if anyone is willing to pay in my system, because that's the crucial part. That's what is going to generate revenue as well. If anyone was willing to purchase an item by paying in my system, which means I need to at least give a flow where people will be able to log in, select items, and pay in the system. So which means I'm not going to do entire feature of login, etc., etc. I'm going to pick up the minimalistic items of how can I minimally log in? How can I minimally select an item? How can I minimally do a payment? Maybe one payment method. So my customer order journey with a payment option, if that's the goal that I can create as a coherent item, then it makes your life easier, because you're not worried about fixing of 10 items, whereas you're worried about picking the most important items or the most valuable items to get to the market so that I can validate my assumption. This headache is much more easier to handle by forming a sprint goal and then trying to figure out what items that I can pick up for the sprint goal, rather than fixing up the 10 items and then moving on to it. So I hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you.
So that way you reduce spillovers as well. You're picking up less items, you're finishing everything. That way you don't have spillovers. Okay, let's take for an example, even by doing that, if you have some sort of a scenario that your items are getting or in a state that it is not getting completed, probably that's where you got to think, hey, what's the trade-off? Can I drop off the bottom 2 items and then complete the 1 item that is half done, so that I have completed items? At least out of the 5 that I pick, I have 3 to 4 items complete and 1 completely incomplete, so that can be moved to the next sprint. So those sort of trade-offs that you need to do in your sprints along with your product owners, so that your finishing items rather than starting items and then keeping it halfway. I hope that
That's
helps.
great. I hope that helps. And if you need more clarification, let us know, Nadine. Thank you for that. All right. So this question from Jacob. What should you do when you joined a company as a Scrum Master and then your boss requires you to do things that were meant for a waterfall project manager? Preparing a Gantt chart, preparing project report for the project steering meeting, joining the change advisory board of the project, managing a budget, distributing work to team members to ensure productivity, etc. How do we make that shift?
I empathize you. I've been in your state, right? What I've done is I've done all those whatever they asked for. And I also asked them, can I do one thing on my own? One thing. Can I start creating a sprint goal for the team so that they're focusing on the sprint? This Scrum has one concept of sprint goal and then creating increments. These are the one thing that I want to do. By creating a sprint goal, I'm trying to achieve it. I'll have all your items, whatever you're coming into. I'll update it. I'll do all these things. But this is the thing that I want your permission for. So trying to move a smallest of needle and then trying to show them a glimpse of promising land. Hey, by using this, you have this value coming at every 2 sprints. I've done this, boss. So earlier, if I done this way, we would have only done half of this complete. Now I've completed something like this. So asking permission from them. So basically, you're collaborating with your boss and then trying to move your needle slowly. So it's not like overnight you can change everything. There is no magic wand like that. You need to take baby steps, definitely. And as I said, the core thing about is what's in it for me from your boss's perspective. Give that. What's in it for them when they use Scrum, right? Try to see if you can talk in their language that helps them. If they're worried about stakeholder communication, why is the Gantt chart used for? Empathize with them. Ask those, what are the purposes of all these things that they're using for? Understand from them and try and see how you can give the similar information by using Scrum, but in a different format. So those are the stuff. It's again collaborative learning. Give them what they need in a different format. Scrum has all those what they need, what they were doing it in those different types of reports. There is an underlying purpose for those reports as well. So all these you get in your Scrum as well with the help of your product backlogs. So that's the tip that I would give it to you. I don't know, James. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that others can definitely resonate with that as well. So this question from Daniel, I have a team that has a primary objective of improving performance in the product. This is achieved by short spikes followed by user stories that implement the performance gains. It is very hard to create a complete product backlog to predict delivery. Do you have any tips for a research team in Scrum?
Okay, so I guess whatever you're doing is perfectly fine. It's just that you got to set up your sprint goal based on that. So the one problem that I have, so you talked about predictable delivery. So let's talk about what is the delivery that you're going to give. Let's put that in terms of value. Hey, predictable value that I can deliver. I'm going to improve the performance of my system. If that's the goal, right? I'm going to definitely improve at least one or the other performance by working on the spikes at the same time, and I'm trying to improve the system based on the learnings from the spikes, right? So creating a sprint goal in a way that you can work on the performance items. If performance is the most important thing that at this moment, then create your sprint goal based on that. That helps you bring in items and then work on those items as well, and then improve your performance. So tying it back to your sprint goal is the solution.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so this is a agile transformation type of question. In your experience, do organizations use an agile roadmap during their transformations? And does this run in parallel with the product roadmap and or organizational strategic goals?
Okay, fair question. It's good if you have an agile roadmap as well, but it should not be a fixed roadmap. The only thing is like the roadmap are like not a fixed roadmap. It's like, let's take for an example, you take a GPS. Your GPS is showing a path now, right? That is your tentative path that you may go. If everything goes smooth, you can go in the same roadmap. What if there is a incident that happens in that middle? You got to take a detour. Probably you got to do it, right? So as you rightly said, if you could have an organizational or strategic goals that are in line with your product goals, then your both of your roadmaps would be similar, right? So which means that whatever I'm doing as an organization to an agile transformation, this is going to complement to my product delivery. See, end of the day, your transformations are there to deliver value to the end users or the customers. So obviously it should be connected. If the both are very distinct, then I would recommend you guys to have a sit down and then check why it is so distinct. It should be what do you call it? I don't know if I'm struggling for the right word. It should be embracing each other. It should be working together well, both goals. So that's how I see it. If it's different, then probably that's the point of awareness that you're getting, that, hey, we need to refine this or try and see if we are doing the right thing. So yeah, that's the first thing to do it, and keep your roadmap flexible so that you can take a detour anytime if there is a change that is needed.
Awesome. Thank you. I hope that helps. All right. We have time for several more questions here. So this question from Jacob, how do you size a spike during sprint planning? Do you recommend this approach? What do you do when, as an agile coach not teaching Scrum? Wait, I'm having a hard time reading this question. So what do you do when, as an agile coach, not teaching Scrum right will lead to the wrong result, as the team will no longer be doing Scrum, versus teaching Scrum right and losing your job because everybody agrees with you except the sponsor, the boss of the project? Ooh.
Very interesting question. I'll talk again, two questions here. How do you size a spike during a sprint planning? When you say sizing, you're not talking about estimation, if I'm not wrong. Sizing is all about, is it, can this be completed within a sprint? Is there a realistic spike? That's all, right? If you have that answer, go ahead with it. But if you're trying to think in the angle of, hey, you know what, I need to think an estimation, then it's a difficult thing. See, Scrum doesn't talk anything about estimations. So I'm a advocate of going for no estimations at times, right? If you don't have estimations, then you don't have this problem of how much will I complete? So how much will I report to the end users or the managers or the management, right? So then you don't have this problem of thinking of how much will I complete. So if you still have it, then have a complexity based sizing. If you could give a story point, give it. If you have a practice like, hey, we don't estimate spike, good. So you reserve some time for your spike or a capacity for in your sprint, and then start doing the spike. So spike should be a learning and an action that you can take based out of the learning as well. If it's just the learning, I would recommend you to see what is the minimalistic action that you can take from the learning within that particular sprint as well. So having a bandwidth for that helps, right? That's one way to look at spikes. That's my recommendation on using spikes in your sprints and sprint plannings. Okay, now coming to your next question. So this is where, as an agile coach, if you're an agile coach, leave about Scrum, right? Any change that you're bringing in, try to have an alignment with your sponsor. That's the first thing that I would be asking the sponsor. Hey, why an agile coach? Why me? That will be the first question I would try to understand from the sponsor. If you don't see an alignment, then probably help the sponsor educate by explaining that, hey, from an agile coach standpoint, this is what I'm coming in for. How does it resonate with you? If they say, no, I don't want this, I want you to be giving all these things, probably as someone said, Gantt chart or whatever things, not so agile, then probably ask them again a follow-up question. So by doing this, whatever the charts, what are we trying to get out of it? Somewhere around the thing, your sponsor will be tying it back to the business value or the outcome. So they may not be explicitly saying, you got to prod them and then understand the core reasons against why are they trying to doing in certain way. All right, there should be a purpose. That purpose, ask them, okay, if this is your purpose, can I help you achieve this purpose by doing it in a different way? Try to have an alignment. Again, moving a smallest of the needle, trying to get a buy-in for your agile ways of working. That's the first important thing that as an agile coach should be doing, right? Along with you working with the teams in the right way of implementing Scrum.
Super important advice there. Thank you. All right. So we have time for a couple more questions. So this question from Hirsch. Hirsch is asking, how do we break down large product backlog items? What are your suggestions for slicing and breaking down those bigger pieces?
So if you go to your Scrum guide, there is a very simple thing. So break down items in a way that it can be completed within a sprint. That is the Bible, I would say. Whatever breakdown that you can do, there are a lot of techniques. There are techniques like invest, make the item independent, negotiable, testable, small, estimable, and valuable. That is another technique. Irrespective of the techniques, try and see how that can be individually done, at the same time deliver some value to the customers. That's it. And that should be completed. That can be completed within a sprint length, that whatever you are agreeing on. So that should be the tip to start with.
That's great. Thank you. And I will drop a link in the chat in a second here with a learning series that we have on product backlog management. That would be helpful. Yeah. So this question from, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Holger. What kind of sprint goal would you suggest if the team is used to working on individual sprint relevant tickets that are important for the requesting department?
Okay, so that's interesting. So first thing first, as a Scrum Master, I would try to see how do we bring those departmental requests into one umbrella as a product owner under the big product backlog. That gives transparency. That's one. So in my experience, how we have worked is, I've worked in a similar mode, but in a different thing. We will have different stakeholders coming up with different streams of requests. So we try to tie it back to the end user and then try to create a coherent goal. Let's take for an example, if there are multiple improvement requests, so end of the day, it is going to tie it back to a customer value or something of that sort. If you could relate to that, like, hey, let's take for an example. We had a concept of categorizing our product backlog into different streams. I can call it as an epics, so in a way that, hey, if there are multiple requests coming in from a customer point of view, is it customer desire, or is it customer, or is it like compliance, or is it like some other benefit or a new feature, something of that sort? Then we try and see, hey, if there are multiple requests coming from multiple stakeholders, and this looks more important. Now we're going to improve the customer desire in this sprint by doing XYZ. That could be a sprint goal that you can think of, which will have different requests from different departments in one sprint, and then you are working for them. So which way you are going to communicate to the stakeholders, hey, we're going to do some customer desires. In case if you have some more customer desire requests coming in these lines, keep sending them across. We're going to prioritize this. So that way you have a streamlined setup that's given by the product owner to the stakeholders to keep bringing the changes. We're welcoming changes and we're keeping it in one place. And we're going to together collaborate and then see which is more important out of these customer desires, and then trying to pick the top items and then create a coherent goal with respect to customer desire. I hope that helps.
Awesome, thank you. Right, I think we have time for one last question. So when multiple teams in an organization are following Scrum, what is your advice to have cross-team sprint planning and coordination between teams in delivering value together?
Okay, so I'm a strong advocate of using Nexus. So the core thing is, like, I've used Nexus in a way. Let's talk about you asked about the first thing, cross-team refinement, right? If possible,
They actually asked cross-team sprint planning.
Okay, cross-team sprint planning, right? So cross-team sprint planning, again, this is where the new Scrum Guide having an option of a product goal helps well. Now, having a product goal is like one goal for multiple teams. Now, as multiple teams, how are we going to do a sub goals in our sprints, which is like sprint goals of our individual teams? If you could create an Nexus sprint planning, which is like a combined sprint planning where the representatives of the teams comes in and then do a sprint planning. If it's less than 3 teams, when all the teams can come in and then do a sprint planning together, we call that as Nexus sprint planning, where we are agreeing on the sprint goals based on the product goal, and then agreeing on goals for the individual teams, and then trying to high level agree on what sort of product backlogs that we may do to achieve the sprint goal, and then come to our individual sprint planning and then break it down a bit more, and then working it out, and then having not just that, right? Now creating a sprint backlog, which is like a holistic list, one single product sprint backlog, which is going to be a transparent information for all the 3 teams, what other teams are working on. The core thing here is identifying, or I should say identifying dependencies, eliminating dependencies, and then trying to see how individual teams can work without dependencies is the crucial factor here in the sprint planning. So if you are able to bring that down to a very minimal dependencies, then that's the first success that you're going to create an integrated increment at the end of your sprint.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So thank you, everybody, for asking your questions. I know there are some questions that were not answered yet. I am going to share those with Arun to make sure that we figure out a way to address those. So don't worry. We just had an influx of questions and we got to as many as we could. So I just want to thank you, Arun, so much for your time today. And thank you to our live audience and our podcast listeners as well for tuning in. And our audience here today asked some really great questions. So thank you so much for participating. Very quickly, I just want to share, again, I mentioned this earlier, we have a lot of free resources on the Scrum.org website, including some learning paths. Please check those out to help you continue your learning. There are webinars, videos, white papers, case studies, all of that kind of stuff that can help you on your learning journey. And please stay connected with us through our social media channels. And Arun, what is the best way for our audience to stay in touch with you? Would that be LinkedIn, or is there another way that you prefer?
Probably I can put my LinkedIn profile in the chat. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer your questions, but give me a bit of time because there might be a lot of chats that are coming in. So that's the only reason. So I would definitely answer all the questions if you're gonna throw me in your LinkedIn chats by connecting with me.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you everybody again for your participation today, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and Scrum on. Thank you.
Scrum on. Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in today.